निशान साथ है इतने के कुछ शुमार नहीं हमारे दीन का क़िस्सों पे मदार नहीं।
My name is Mohammad Atae Rabbi Hadi, and I am a missionary of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community currently serving in Queensland, Australia. Like many Ahmadiyya Muslims across the globe, I share with you today one of many experiences I've had of witnessing a living God. This is the story of how my family and I made it through the worst flooding to take place within the past half century in eastern Australia. Our destination was the foundation stone laying ceremony of the Baitul Hadi Mosque in Canberra, the nation's capital, which was held on Sunday 21st March 2021. Australia is prone to severe weather events, and in Queensland in particular, we frequently receive alerts for thunderstorms, hail, and strong winds, as well as flash flooding. These events often pass without anyone thinking twice, mostly because they do not cause much harm. On the day we were to begin our journey, although we were not aware of any severe weather warning, we did receive a very kind message from the president of Brisbane Jamaat containing prayers and advice to be careful on our journey due to heavy rain. But honestly, we had no idea what we were headed for. We decided to begin our journey from the Baitul Masroor Mosque in Brisbane after offering the Jummah prayer, and since we have young children, we plan to break up the long 13-hour drive by resting halfway during the journey. Similarly, we were unable to leave straight after Jummah and left an hour or so later, and this point is particularly important due to how the events actually transpired later on during our journey. As we exited our residence, I felt an overwhelming need to supplicate and give sadaqah, so I shared this with my wife straight away.
This time, we both had this overwhelming urge to give more sadaqah and also pray more. I remember sharing this with my husband and my husband did the same as well, that despite us making journeys like this before, because of his work where we had prayed and we give sadaqah, but this time the need to concentrate on these two aspects was more.
Now, most of our initial journey was smooth, but as we traveled further down south, the rain started to get more and more intense. At around 10:30 p.m., 15 minutes away from our booked accommodation, we approached traffic at a complete standstill. People were out of their cars and walking about on the highway, and we soon found out that the road ahead was completely flooded, and everyone was waiting for the tide to recede off of the highway. However, there were no emergency services around. All we could do was just wait in the darkness of the night. An hour and a half later, at around midnight, we started watching the live Friday sermon of our beloved Huzur, may Allah be his helper, as we continued to wait. And for some reason, I had another strong feeling that traffic would now only move after the sermon of beloved Huzur would end. And to my surprise, this is exactly what had happened. Now, as we started moving towards our exit, we started to wonder what had really happened, since there was no apparent sign of flooding besides the rain. And after taking the exit, however, we soon realized how wrong we were. Much like most regional town roads in Australia, it was dark and eerily surrounded by trees. However, this time, the branches and the leaves that were scattered across the road told a completely different story. We observed a car which was completely flipped upside down, and a road blockade made by the emergency services stopped us from moving any forward. The emergency service personnel asked us where we were headed, and when we informed them of our destination, with utter disappointment, they informed us that our accommodation had been submerged completely under flooded waters. We honestly could not believe what we were hearing. I decided to further ask that where could we spend the night then, and they advised us that our best chances were in a town called Port Macquarie, which was just slightly further ahead. They also advised us that we need to proceed with caution and to only stay on the path that was described by them, and that any wrong turn would lead into flooded waters. At this point, I still don't think we were fully aware of the seriousness of the situation, but as we slowly drove ahead, we soon realized the gravity of what was actually happening. We saw multiple cars were demolished, they were battered and scattered haphazardly everywhere, and we nearly drove into a trailer, causing us to swerve, followed by a kangaroo which had barely survived. What we were seeing with our eyes honestly felt like it could only happen in the movies. My heart started to race as we finally began to register what we had been saved from.
After seeing that road and the damage the flood had caused, one thing that we all agreed, my husband and I, that Allah Ta'ala had saved us from a massive devastation, because if we weren't stranded in that traffic, if we hadn't left an hour after Jummah, it would have been us, maybe on the side of the road or in that flooded accommodation. So at that time, after that realization, I think I was overwhelmed and thankful to Allah.
It was around 2 a.m. now. Witnessing the devastation we had just passed by, I pulled over to gather my thoughts and check where we were actually going and how far we were. And once again, I experienced an overwhelming thought that we should not head towards Port Macquarie. We should not go where the fire service personnel had told us to. But this time it came like a wave of emotions that I just could not ignore. It was much stronger than anything I had felt in this journey before.
So I remember we were both sitting down, and my husband took out his phone to see the direction that was given by the fire services that we were told where to go. I remember he looked at his phone maybe for 10 seconds, and he put it down and he said, "We're not going to where the fire services had told us." And I remember at that time thinking that, are we sure? Should we do that? But the conviction that he had said it with, and what we had just been through, and the realization that we had that had happened to us, I knew that I had to support him. And I told him, you know what, let's do this. We will maybe stop by the side of the roads, but let's keep moving forward.
Now, as the traffic slowly cleared, we were allowed to drive through shallow flooded waters by the police with a word of caution. As we were driving, we tried calling around to find accommodation, unsure where we would go and how far it would be. Eventually, however, a very kind and gentle voice answered the phone. After sharing our predicament with some thought, she eventually managed to arrange a room for us, telling us that she would meet us later in the morning. We unpacked our bags and offered Fajr prayer and tried to get to sleep as quickly as we could. This, however, didn't last too long since our kids were up again within 2 hours at around 9 a.m. So, in contemplation of how I could get back to sleep, I decided to check my phone and I realized I had received an emergency alert from the SES stating that we needed to evacuate the area. And my wife had also received the same message. So, though we needed to sleep very badly, we decided that we should just keep moving forward to Canberra. So we started packing up to leave. Now, just as we were done loading the car, Michelle arrived at the reception, and this is when I asked her regarding the evacuation notice that we had received through a text message, and she explained that Tari, the town that we were in, had been hit really badly by this flood, and that all the roads were closed. But since this was on the edge of Tari at one of the highest points, many people were trying to get a place to stay here. She also added that all the roads heading back north to Queensland were closed and that there is a chance we would not be able to continue our journey down south to Canberra. But we had to try. As we continued traveling, we shockingly watched news footage and reports of the sheer magnitude of the flood that had hit Tari. We overwhelmingly realized how Allah Himself had navigated our whole journey with His own hands. Allah had made us stop exactly when we needed to and let us continue exactly when we needed to, every step of the journey, in fact, right from when we left our residence in Brisbane. We were also informed that another group from our community, which left from Queensland early that morning, was turned away from Port Macquarie due to the floods. The same place where we decided not to stop the night before against the advice of the emergency services. We realized that if we had left straight after Jummah and we had not been delayed, we would have not been stopped by the standstill traffic that we had to patiently wait in, and would have most probably arrived at our booked accommodation, which would have made ourselves fall prey and fall victim to the flood. We were given a place to stay exactly when it was the opportune moment for our safety and for us to be able to continue the journey on the other side of the floods at the highest point, right at the edge of the worst affected flood area in that location. By the grace and blessings of Allah, we arrived in Canberra on Saturday night. right on time and took part in the ceremony the following day. Though it was a long journey for both my wife and I, but surprisingly, we really enjoyed the experience and the thrill of it all, especially since it was accompanied by constant prayer and witnessing the hand of God. There are so many intimate details of this whole experience that would be impossible for me to share. However, one thing is for sure, we had once again witnessed that Allah is truly the best of planners.